Hey everyone, it's LS, and this is the patch 11.7 notes rundown, and we are back on the T1 fighting channel, and so let's just get right into it. I don't believe this is the MSI patch, and so I'm not expecting actually a lot of changes, because Riot generally doesn't do a whole lot of changes before major big patches like Worlds, MSI, and whatnot, so let's just get right into it. Okay, Alistar. Base damage decrease later, E-empowered basic attack bonus damage decrease. So Pulverize is going to be down 60 to 240 to 60 to 220, so he's losing a little bit of his all-in power. E-Trample is also going to be losing quite a bit of bonus magic damage. That's going to be down by a little bit. Ultimately, all this does is it just affects his all-in a little bit. I'm personally not the biggest fan of Alistar. I think that he's getting picked in spots in competitive where champions like Braum, when it's coming in as like counter pick, would just ultimately serve the purpose a little bit better. All in all, I think that the fact that the damage isn't that different early on is going to mean that it's not the end of the world for Alistar. Generally, his early all-in combos are still going to be roughly the same amount of damage. It is going to be a nerf, but it's not one that's magically going to make you stop picking Alistar, and I don't think that these kind of changes are magically going to start picking Alistar, but I think that it could have a placebo effect in that it causes people to think that Alistar is doomed, and he could end up having a drop-off there. Amumu, Q cost decrease, E cooldown decrease. This is really good for a champion that got completely gutted because it wasn't even his fault. Anyways, Bandage Toss is going to go down by 20 mana at rank 1. This is actually a pretty big deal. He's going to cast this 5, 6, maybe 7 times in his initial early clear, so he's getting a lot of mana early on, which is kind of good. After the first recall, though, Bandage Toss mana, it's not super big, but it is definitely going to be helpful. E-Tantrum is going down by 1 second at every rank. This is probably going to allow him to get 1 extra Tantrum off inside of some of the clears, and inside of team fights, it's probably also going to amount to an extra Tantrum cast. And so, while these are going to be nice changes for Amumu, and he did receive indirect buffs lately, I don't think it's necessarily going to magically put him on top of the radar, even though I think that he is somewhat justifiable for being picked, but that's it. Ashe, R cooldown decrease later. Great, Crowny can miss more comments. R, Enchanted Crystal Arrow, 180 seconds to 160 seconds. So, this doesn't really do a whole lot, so her Enchanted Crystal Arrow, basically at rank 1 and rank 2, is roughly still going to be the same, especially when you factor in ability haste and whatnot. The rank 3 ultimate, it's sort of luxurious. You're casting it off cooldown. Yes, 20 seconds being shaved off is a pretty big deal. It allows you to use it a little bit more freely, but at level 16, rank 3 on Ashe, I mean, there's other things that are going on, and it's certainly not the cooldown on her R. Braum, E cooldown decreased, R maximum knockup duration increased later. Unbreakable is going to have 2 seconds shaved off it at all of the ranks, and R Glacial Fissure is going to have an extra 0.25 seconds added at rank 2, and then 0.5 seconds added at rank 3. So the really key takeaway here is that ultimately you only look at rank 2, and the reason that I say that is because when is Braum ever getting to level 16 inside of a game? It's not really that likely. So all that you're really getting on Braum is 0.25 seconds on Glacial Fissure. The 2 seconds being shaved off of Unbreakable is definitely a big deal, though, and I already think that Braum has already been viable as a counterpick to certain team compositions, and people just haven't been picking him. Hecarim, E bonus movement speed decreased later. Wow, congratulations. Devastating Charge, 25 to 75% to 25 to 65% based on time active. This isn't going to make you stop picking Hecarim. It is a sizable hit. He is basically losing Boots Tier 1, or a little bit more than Boots Tier 1, based on the time active, and ultimately that's also going to cause him to lose some of his damage. This is going to impact tank Hecarim more than it's going to impact it's going to impact tank Hecarim more than it's going to impact AD Hecarim, but ultimately at the end of the day, I mean, whatever. Ivern, E-base damage decrease later. So apparently the reason for this is, I think stated on Reddit, or it stated on Twitter or something, that a bug fix that they did to Daisy just meant that Ivern is doing a lot more than he used to, and so this is supposed to balance it out. E Trigger Seed is just losing 10 damage at rank 3, which is the most notable one. You're probably going to get 2 Trigger Seeds off in a fight early on, and so you can look at this as like losing 20 damage outright in early on phases, but then in later stage team fights, you're probably losing anywhere from 80 to 100 damage most likely, and that is actually a sizable nerf to a Z. Ivern is still probably going to be viable inside of the jungle, even though a lot of people aren't picking him anymore, but I do think that he did get hit very, very hard in an unfair manner, and Riot's probably going to forget about him and not revisit him, even if Moonstone Renewer and other items continue to get hit or something, and he's just never going to be revisited. Kai'Sa, R cooldown increased early. Our Killer Instinct, 110 to 70 seconds to 130 to 70 seconds. So the thing here is that Kai'Sa is not a champion that magically just casts her R off cooldown, even in the early stages. This isn't like Vayne having Final Hour inside of solo queue, which is basically if you get ahead into the laning phase and you have Final Hour and the cooldown is really, really short, you just get to keep chaining kills together. This is also not equivalent to Varus with his ultimate. Kai'Sa is not an AD carry that magically just always casts her ultimate immediately off of cooldown and is always looking to utilize it off cooldown like some of the aforementioned AD carries. So in that regard, having CDR shaved off it, I just feel like this is a nerf that they throw in here to appease people that are calling for Kai'Sa nerfs, but ultimately it shouldn't really touch her all that much. And then once mid-game, level 11, level 16 comes into play, I mean, it's just not doing anything. Q, Kindred, bonus damage ratio increase, E cooldown decrease. So Dance of Arrows is getting 10% more AD on the bonus damage ratio. This is kind of nice, but the thing is that Kindred builds a lot of attack speed items, and so it's not like she's pounding on a whole lot of AD, and so while the buff is definitely nice, I don't think it's really addressing some of the things that's going to make Kindred a powerhouse. I do think that Kindred already is viable right now inside of the meta, and just people aren't really picking her, and it seems like she's almost been forgotten about. She's really, really good with stand your ground type team compositions, and she's really good against deathball comps, which are very prevalent right now inside of the meta. E mounting Dread is getting 2 seconds shaved off it at all of the ranks. This is something that is definitely very valuable to have shaved off, and so that's definitely much more of a sizable buff. Hopefully this puts Kindred more on people's radars. Lissandra, Q base damage increased. So one of the things that I think slipped under the radar is I didn't actually give Lissandra more credit than I should have when the Everfrost buffs came in. That would have made her a lot better. I should have actually probably bumped her on the patron tier list a little bit more, but I didn't. QI Shard is going to give her 10 damage per, or it's just a flat 10 damage at all ranks. I will be honest in that I don't know how this influences her wave clear. That's ultimately the big question. If this allows her to just QE a wave or QW a wave and shove it in a lot smoother, then this also converts into sustain inside a lane via having higher mana available to you, and it just makes things all the while better. But Everfrost is getting nerfed this patch, and so it's sort of this weird thing. Now, if the wave clear is there, the Everfrost nerf is probably not going to be super big because the wave clear is more important than the Everfrost nerf, but we'll get to that when we end up seeing it. Mordekaiser. This is probably Riot's biggest failed rework. I don't think that I've met any Mordekaiser mains or ex-mains of the champion who feel happy with the current rework, myself included. Mordekaiser is probably my best champion ever in League of Legends, and the one that honestly I just cared about the most. Seeing what's happened to him and seeing what's going on with him with current itemization, because he doesn't actually have a reliable mythic and he doesn't have any current way to build or anything, and he gets completely crippled by QSS to an extent that even Skarner or Malzahar isn't as harmed by, is just all the more problematic. So, I don't know, seeing how they're trying to go about buffing him, it just feels really sad. I don't know what they can do to try to fix him. It really feels like a failure. I think that they need to really look at his W, because his W is definitely the most boring spell, and it's the one that has the least interaction, pretty much all in all. The Q Obliterate is a cool ability. They're giving isolated enemy damage increase. They're making it go up by 10%. This is kind of nice, but the problem is that Mordekaiser's suffering from a lack of items right now, and his builds are very heavy. He just doesn't feel worthwhile to include in a team composition right now, and everything just feels like it's missing with him. I think if his W gets revisited and they come up with something interactive with it, or if they make his R be unable to be QSS'd, that would be another really cool thing that they could maybe end up doing. Or if they change the passive on his R to be something more interesting, or if they give back a ghost of some sorts, maybe on Rift Herald or on Dragon or something of that nature, Mordekaiser become a lot more valuable. But the problem is that he's ultimately the essential version of AP Darius, but doesn't actually have as much utility as Darius does in certain team compositions, primarily because, again, he's hurt so much by magic resistance, and he's so crippled by QSS. Rell, E-stun duration decreased, E attract and repel. I think everyone could, everyone probably resonates with these two words if you've been on Tinder lately. But anyways, E-Attract and Repel, going to be down by 0.25 seconds. Again, I think this is just on par with the Kai'Sa thing. Tenacity and reduction of CC is not like the biggest thing in the world when champions just are going to kill you inside of the CC. If Rell's engaging on you and stunning you up, it's more likely than not just a question of, are you going to die to the CC in general, or are you going to live? Because if you're going to live, then 0.25 seconds being shaved off I don't think really does anything. Teemo. Now, this makes me really happy to see. I was also a Teemo connoisseur once upon a time. I actually only played Teemo for a brief period of time. So seeing Teemo actually getting on the radar of Riot is really, really cool, and I hope that they continue to visit him, because Teemo's another champion that is hurting a lot right now. Anyways, passive Guerrilla Warfare. Teemo's passive really sucks, so I will point that out. Guerrilla Warfare, 3 seconds bonus attack speed to 5 seconds of bonus attack speed. It's really hard for Teemo to utilize this. It's very, very, very luxurious. This does play a part for jungle Teemo. If he comes out of stealth inside of a lane and goes for a gank, he's going to have a little bit more timing window to utilize the bonus attack speed, but ultimately that's it. This is also a really good thing for support Teemo, but for top Teemo or mid Teemo, it feels bad. Toxic Shot is getting 1 extra damage per rank. Slow down there, Riot. Slow down, yeah. Thresh, W base shield decreased later. So Dark Passage is going to be decreased later on inside of the game. This is fine. Thresh is in a really strong state in the hands of people that are really, really good at Thresh. People are picking him in competitive, but they're picking him blind and it's not going punish. So it's always really sad to see when nerfs like this end up coming in. Tristana. So again, if you watch my patch rundown on my other YouTube channel, I did 11.6 on there because the quality and the standard wasn't quite up to par for the kind of videos that I want to put out on T1 Fighting. You would have known that sometimes we get buggy patch notes given over to us because I get these patch notes very early. I'm actually making this video almost a week before the patch notes are coming out, and or actually, I guess not quite a week, almost a week. But anyways, Tristana is losing 2 AD. That's all that's happening. I know that it doesn't say it here. A little bit scuffed, I know, my apologies, okay? She's losing 2 AD. Udyr is also losing 2 AD. These type of changes, I'm really curious about them. I'm not going to talk about why I'm curious about them, but I will reveal something probably later on. I do have something in the works that actually specifically targets and references these types of changes and what they do inside of patches, and that'll probably end up being a video later down the line in a couple of months from now, because I need a lot more stuff to go into that video before I just actually talk about what these kind of changes actually mean or what they do and how I actually perceive them. So that's going to be, that's ultimately a work in progress. Varus. So his base attack damage growth is increased. I believe he gets 6.8 AD at level 18. Not super big, however, he is going Lethality Varus, and I do think that currently he is viable, and people have just forgotten that he's viable because they didn't want to relearn his CSing patterns in lane, but also because AD carries have forgotten that Teleport is a really, really, really good spell. And so, champions like Varus and a lot of other AD carries, especially with nerfs happening to other ADCs that are ultimately indirect buffs to champions like Varus, they are definitely viable again. And with Senna starting to grow a lot inside of popularity, Seraphine continuing to grow inside of popularity, or Seraphine getting a lot of popularity as well. Teleport Varus, Lethality Varus, with the new build right now, being able to just go either Prowler's Claw or just going Duskblade of Drakthar if you need CDR or something of that nature, and then going for the Mirror Mana and getting all that good jazz, and then just going Lethality Varus. That is going to be very good. Yasuo, I believe, gets 13.6 AD at level 18 with his base attack growth increase. So, not super big. It is a free longsword and a little bit more. That is very nice. It's also interesting to me because normally when Yasuo gets buffed, Yone gets buffed. So they sort of like keep the brothers in line. But anyways, it just seems like Yasuo is getting a little bit of love. Anyways, Yorick. So this one is really weird, and I was actually talking about, I was talking about Yorick even recently, wondering, can he actually jungle? Can he go top lane? Can he do other things? And yada, yada, yada. Marked enemy champions and large monsters now awaken nearby graves. This is actually kind of a big deal for Yorick jungle. Now, I looked up Yorick jungle on a couple of various places, and I found out that no one's actually playing him. This champion is just not played. I'm talking triple-digit numbers. No one's touching this champion. It's really, really weird. And honestly, I don't think Yorick's that bad. And so these changes to him are definitely a step in the right direction. Marked enemy champions and large monsters now continuously awaken nearby graves up to a maximum of 4. That's a nice little buff. And then you will be missed. Mistwalkers now deal 200% damage when they leap to marked enemy champions or large monsters, which really hastens his clear. The question for me is, how quick is his clear? And honestly, at the time of making this video, I don't know off the top of my head because I don't even know where to begin for runes, and I don't even know how you would go about it. I know that there is an OCE jungler named, I think, Ninetales or something, that actually predominantly plays Yorick jungle, and he actually plays it at a high MMR. I think he's probably one of the only players in the world that actually plays Yorick, but I'm not sure. That would probably be a good starting reference point to begin looking for stuff, but pretty much it. If targeting outside of cast range, E now immediately casts to max range. Generally, I'm against changes like this, but I don't know how it actually interacts with Yorick. Basically, if you've never played Yorick before, it doesn't matter because you never knew what it was like to have the opposite one. But yeah, when I see stuff like this on Syndra and Karthus, it always feels bad. Okay, let's move into items. Essence Reaver is going to be 2,900 to 2,800 gold, but it's going to lose 1080. This is a massive nerf to Essence Reaver. It's such a big hit. And obviously this hits all the Mythicless itemizations. It hits Xayah. This hits a lot of champions right now, and it does not feel good. Basically, the way that you contextualize 100 gold being missing when you're completing this item, if you're completing it second as your legendary, or you're completing it first and then going into the mythic, ultimately all this is 30 seconds. That's all that it is. You're waiting 30 seconds, you're losing 1080. It feels really bad. Everfrost. Glaciate damage is down by a flat 25 and it's down by 5% AP. Now I will say that a lot of champions that build Everfrost don't actually stack a whole lot of AP, so the damage loss there is not going to be super big, but the base damage is going to feel a little bit bad. In terms of the wave clear and whatnot, generally it's not super important for the wave clear. However, I will talk about up there for Lissandra, the Q damage. If she ends up using 2 Qs now, she's going to be having roughly almost the same amount of damage if she did a previous Everfrost combo. But again, for the Lissandra aspect, it just matters on how she wave clears the lane, and that's pretty much all that you have to focus on there. So it is a nerf to Everfrost, but champions like Cho'Gath right now, absolutely insane, super broken champion, and definitely a really good user of Everfrost, and I think Everfrost is just still underappreciated. Lord Dominik's Regard is going to go up by 100 gold, and it's going to lose 5 AD, so this definitely feels bad, because this is an item that you typically pick up third, but on some champions you did pick it up second. However, it is still one of the best items in the game, and so don't sleep on it. Serylda's Grudge. We've gotten over our Grudge, making Serylda is more accessible for assassins. Well, the problem for this is I was actually talking about how certain champions in the game, if they utilize Serylda's Grudge, or if they utilize Lord Dominik's Regard, plus 1 lethality item, given the power of these items, they're able to then go into like off-tank builds and then still be able to assassinate basically AP carries, AD carries, but then have enough durability to tango with tanks and bruisers, which is really weird. Now, the really weird footnote here is that it's more accessible for assassins. The thing is that I can't imagine someone like Zed or Talon or any of those AD assassins wanting Serylda's Grudge over Lord Dominik's Regard, because the slow is ultimately pretty luxurious to someone like that. So I'm not totally sure when Serylda's Grudge would ever actually be better than Lord Dominik's Regard. I just really can't imagine that it would be. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but maybe on someone like Qiyana, it could be better. I'm not totally sure, but Qiyana, I guess, would maybe come to mind. Trinity Force. Trinity Force went a bit too heavy on the attack speed, which cut it off from a larger audience. In turn, we're forcing a new hand of stats and mythic passive that should make it feel like a real contender for more users. Attack damage, 25 to 30, and attack speed is going to be 35 to 30. Okay, so the AD is going up, which is definitely nice. Another fold, 3-fold strike now stacks on towers. That's a massive buff for Gangplank, massive buff for Camille, massive buff for Fiora, if she ends up using this. And now the mythic passive is not 10% attack speed. It's 3 AD, 3 movement speed, and 3 ability haste. Now, this is very interesting because once you get like 3 mythic items, or legendary, sorry, you get a longsword, you get magical boots, and then you get, obviously, the ability haste. Now, this is a massive buff to Gangplank. Gangplank finally has a mythic again. Now, Gangplank's current build, if you have been watching Onion, who's probably the best Gangplank player that you could ever watch on any of the regions right now, Gangplank, he's already been going Trinity Force and Ravenous Hydra on Gangplank, and Trinity Force is basically Gangplank's item. This is also a massive buff to Yorick, if Yorick actually is a Trinity Force user, which I do believe that he is. So all of these things are super big for him. In addition to that, this is also, I think, pretty big for Set, who is also another Trinity Force user. Camille, really big value here as well. I think that this is also a nice big change for Alawi, who I think before was only using Divine Blunderer, Stridebreaker, and Gore Drinker were her 3 items before. However, Alawi does have the second highest, or arguably the highest, because Meganar doesn't count. She has the highest base AD in the game, and so gets the greatest multiplier from the Triforce. And so, given the loss of attack speed, not the end of the world, she has an auto reset on her W, and she's a champion that relies on spacing. These are all really big changes. This is also another big buff for, I think, Darius, but I don't know if he'll just take this over Stridebreaker. He probably would take this over Stridebreaker, but ultimately, I think this is just really good. Really, really nice change. Turbo Chemtank, supercharged bonus movement speed is down by 15%, so you actually lose almost tier 2 boots, roughly. And then supercharged slow is up by 10%. That's just luxury. It doesn't really do anything. So yeah, this is just a nerf to Chemtank. It's fine. In-game shop updates. You can now purchase from the results of a search. Rejoice. That's really cool. So make sure to search LS if you want to buy Leandri's Anguish, or make sure to search last space shadow if you're trying to get Morellonomicon or Leandri's Anguish. Not bragging. Don't worry. Anyways, items in the shopping inventory. I learned to count and will now display quantities correctly. That's good. And then just nice little things here. Rift ranked progression. Very good. Bug fixes. So normally I never do bug fixes. However, there were 2 in here that really did stand out to me. They did fix the Seraphine bug, which was that her passive was allowing allies to proc Moonstone Renewer, which ended up giving Seraphine a lot more healing via Moonstone and ultimately more rapids. And then also a bug on Karma's shields on her E and her W is another one that obviously, you know, stood out. And then Gore Drinker and Stride Breaker and, you know, yada, yada, yada. So, anyways, normally, yeah, I don't go into it. Okay, let's get to the most important part of the patch, okay? But before I do that, let's just recap really quickly on all the champions. Alistar doesn't really do anything for solo queue or competitive. It does anything, it's more for solo queue. Amumu, really big for solo queue, doesn't really do a whole lot for competitive because no one's really picking him. Ashe, luxurious. Braum is maybe one of the biggest buffs from the patch. Hecarim, nerf, you know, whatever. Ivern, nerf, is definitely impactful. Kaisa, nerf, whatever. Kindred, hopefully puts her on the map. Lissandra, ultimately, it's a big question. Does it actually affect her wave clear at this point in time? I don't know. I think a really good person to look at would obviously be Freak's patch rundowns when he talks about champions and whatnot and breakpoints and items and stuff like that. It would be really good. Mordekaiser, failed rework. Rell doesn't matter. Teemo, it's at least good that he's on the map. I mean, that's all I'm going to say. Thresh doesn't matter. Tristana doesn't matter. Udyr doesn't matter. Varus is nice, but again, I don't think it matters. Yasuo doesn't really matter. Yorick, it ultimately just matters if he can jungle. Yet again, Riot releases a pretty bland patch, and so I do feel a little bit sad about that. There's not a lot of changes, I will be completely honest with you. If you were thinking about, you know, the patron tier list and all that other good jazz, the last patch did not have a whole lot of changes. This one is probably also not going to have a lot of changes. I mean, I will see what Yorick is going to do. I will consult with a lot of people on Yorick and whatnot. I think that Yorick jungle is probably the only real big change that can come out of this patch. I think Braum will probably rise a bit in popularity. Maybe Amumu gets bumped or something like that, but ultimately, that is pretty much it. Okay, now we're going to get into the skins, and I know what you're thinking. You're probably wondering, where can I get the best skins? And I know what you're referring to. You're referring to the T1 hoodie that I'm wearing right now, as well as Blue Moon Bear's T1 jersey. Unfortunately, you can use the affiliate link in the description below to get T1 merchandise, which has free shipping, okay, over a certain amount of money spent, and a very nice discount using the code LASTSpaceShadow, just like in the Riot game store. But anyways, let's get into the skins now that I'm done selling out. So I don't know who this is. It looks like it could be Lux. I'm actually gonna scroll down and see if it is Lux. It is Lux. Okay, so this is Lux. It doesn't really do it for me. Normally Lux skins are really cool, but the skin doesn't really do it for me. It just sort of seems like a filler. I imagine it's still gonna sell really well, but I don't know. I'm getting some really weird, like, Sleeping Beauty, something. Honestly, I don't know. This is just really weird. This looks like Mega Man's wife or something like that. I don't know what's going on with the helmet here, but she's probably thinking about Zero, because honestly, who'd be thinking about Mega Man? Anyways, let's move on from here. So this is Super Galaxy Rumble. Now, I will say, or not Super Galaxy Rumble, what? It's Space Groove Rumble. Now, I will say that Rumble looks like Carbuncle from Final Fantasy VIII, I think. Carbuncle, if you guys ever saw Carbuncle, hopefully the editor puts an image of Carbuncle up so I do not look like an idiot, but if you see his chromas, it definitely does look like Carbuncle. And actually, I will show you guys the chromas right now so that you guys know that I'm not insane and that it does definitely look like Carbuncle. Right there, Carbuncle. You see these green ones? They're Carbuncle. Okay? Anyways, we move on from there. This is Space Groove Gnosis. Honestly, this one is a little bit underwhelming for me. I mean, it kind of is pretty cute. It's like a Shiba Inu, just running around. Space Groove Gnosis is, I mean, it's an interesting, cute skin. I mean, I can get behind it. I can definitely see people using it. This is Nunu and Willump. This one feels the most out of place. This actually doesn't feel like Space Groove. It feels like something from Pokemon Sword and Shield, like that, like, Fairy Town, if you guys know what I'm talking about. I completely forgot how to pronounce it, but it definitely feels like something from there. And so this is a weird skin because it's called Blitz and Crank, which is very interesting because I don't know if Blitzcrank is actually categorized by his arm or whatever. Obviously, it's a really cute skin. The chromas for it look absolutely fantastic, and ultimately, I mean, the skin is just super, super, super adorable. Samira skin, Doesn't really look like anything super special. I don't know what this cat is. I don't know what that UFO thing is in the background, but it seems like a lot of the. I mean, honestly, this is. There are a. I don't know if I can make that joke or I'll get demonetized. I'm not gonna go for that joke, but don't you worry. The Samira skin, probably not going to be a skin that you want to lock in, but, you know, who knows, whatever. We move on, and so this is probably the best Space Groove skin, and I know what you're thinking, it's just Lulu. Wrong, it's Prestige Edition Lulu. And everyone knows that if you're trying to make your opponents upset, you want to utilize Prestige Edition skins, because that way, whether they beat you or lose to you, they still know, man, that guy had that Prestige Edition skin, he's so cool. Probably hangs out with the hottest chicks, hottest guys, hottest dolls. I don't know where we're going with this. Whatever. You know? Whatever. Anyways, Prestigious and Lulu definitely looks like the coolest skin. I think it has the coolest chromas as well, and I think it's just the cutest looking skin out of the entire bunch. I'm not really a very big fan of the other skins. So, that's pretty much it. All the chromas look pretty okay. The Lulu skins, I think that ultimately you're just going to want to get the Prestige Edition. I don't think anything else really stands out. A lot of the chromas for some of these skins, though, they just look really out of place. Honestly, Nunu and Willem kind of scares me. It looks like some sort of a frog monster. It doesn't even actually look like Space Groove. It just feels like that one really whiffed. The Gnosis one does have some pretty cute skins, but also it has one that kind of looks like it's the Engineer or something from Prometheus, and that just kind of frightens me. But anyways, that's it for the patch 11.7 notes rundown. Hopefully, we get a very good patch for 11.8, which I do think is going to be the MSI patch. Viego is not going to be enabled. I really hope something happens because the meta is starting to get a little bit bland. However, I will say that Riot has been doing a fantastic job this year compared to previous years with actually mixing up and having a lot more volatility inside of the patch notes, because these have been some of the most meta-changing patch notes as well as just additions and removals that I think that we've seen in recent years, and I definitely think it's a very good change of pace, and I really hope they don't start dialing back now.